because all of the sunlight is starting this reaction between the fluorocarbons and ozone. And each of the ozone or fluorocarbon molecules will devour 1 million ozone molecules. I don't know if any of you younger people remember that game Pong where that little mouth eats, and then it's my age we played that little game. And then it went and finally it died. Well, that's exactly what happens with the fluorocarbon molecules. They eat all the ozone, eventually they die. So a little bit of ozone gets rid of, or fluorocarbons gets rid of a lot of ozone. So the world got together, figured out the problem, had the Montreal Protocol, which all the countries of the world agreed will get rid of the 4 chemicals that are causing the problem. And look what happened. They signed it in 1992. Within a few years, look at how well everybody obeyed, and look at all of the 4 chemicals just went down, down, down. This one took a lot longer to start going down. Do you know why? Every one of you know why exactly. How many new refrigerators have you bought in your lifetime? 2, 3, 1, 3. Anyway, they have CFC11 in them. So if you have a refrigerator that you bought 20 years ago, which I still do, it's leaking a little bit of CFC12, but I won't get rid of it until it won't freeze. And that's what's happening on Earth. Look at this chemical, almost gone. These are parts per trillion. Can you visualize what a part per trillion is? Let me give you an illustration. If I take US silver dollars, which are this big, and pile them from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, and then as wide as my arms can reach, and make that 300 kilometers long, 300 kilometers, by a meter, or 2 meter, or a meter, what's this, a fathom by a fathom, you will have 1 trillion silver dollars in there. If you take one of those silver dollars out of that 300 kilometer line and scratch it on one side, we will tell you 99 times out of 100 exactly where you took that coin and what side you scratched it on. That's the accuracy we measure these gases. And they're very small concentrations. Now, let's look at this gas. You'll notice here that something just looks like it's ticking up a little bit. 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. Well, what's happening in the next 4 years? Next slide. All of a sudden, this gas, CFC11, the concentrations in the atmosphere in the northern hemisphere is going up. If you take the difference between the northern and south, look here. All of a sudden, there's a huge amount of CFC11 coming back into the atmosphere. Somebody is violating the Montreal Protocol. This is a huge amount of CFC11 coming into the atmosphere. It's a banned chemical. It should not be produced, but it is. And we just published a paper about 3 weeks ago showing where this is coming from. Where do you think it's coming from? Don't be shy. No, not India. Closer to you. China. And using the different stations and trajectories, we can tell you what province it's coming from. And guessing the province, you can look at the cities and guess what city it's coming from. And, next slide. The New York Times sent some reporters to China, and the people they talked to did not know they were reporters. And they went to this city, and they talked to a number of people, and one of the manufacturers of refrigerators said, you had a choice. Choose the cheapest foam agent that's not so good for the environment, or the expensive one that's better for the environment. This area was using CFC11, and it's banned, but they've got other companies to make it in huge amounts, And they were using it to blow foam into refrigerators and air conditioners and other things. And I would expect that those people are now in big trouble because the upper levels of government were very embarrassed. Because 2 weeks ago, they had to go to the UN, the UNEP program, and explain why China is putting this stuff out. They didn't know that it was happening in the industry. Next slide. Now, let's look at the ozone hole. Something has happened this year that is interesting, but it doesn't really relate to the material from China quite yet. But this is what the ozone hole looks like, the formation. And this is since the ozone hole formed. And the black is the average. So you go see down, and the worst years were here, and then it comes back up. So the ozone hole is only a very short-term thing. It starts in the 1st of September, and it's over the first week in November. On average, the worst ozone holes were right in here. But look at this year. We are only 2 parts per million away from having the lowest ozone ever recorded in Antarctica. But this is probably due to it being much colder. But see this blue line? That was last year. And everybody said, oh good, the ozone hole is fixed. What are they going to say this year? Something has really changed meteorologically. But again, I say, this is not related to the CFC-11s from China yet, because they take 5 years to get up there. And we'll be watching it very close. How are we going to do that? When I leave here in a couple days, I'm going to Korea, and we're installing 2 sites to measure just the CFC-11 coming out of China. And you cannot get any closer than Korea to what's coming out. So we'll be able to check on that. Next slide. You know that we still have car air conditioning and air conditioning in our houses. And so the new chemicals that were made were, these 4 chemicals here. This one is a very strong greenhouse gas. And it was going up, and then it started leveling out, and then all of a sudden it went up again. Because developing countries got a 10-year exemption to phasing this out. And so China and India started producing a huge amount more, because it's very profitable to make this and sell it to Europe and the US surreptitiously or under the, but soon they'll have to, their exemption runs out next year, so they're going to have to start taking control of it if they obey the law. But look at here how fast we can pick up a molecule. We know that this gas is being produced, and as soon as it's sold commercially, look how it goes up. Because cars have accidents, air conditioners leak, people clean ice in their refrigerator with a knife, oh, all leaks out. Next slide. Something else that we measure that's quite interesting. The sunlight, as you know, comes down through the stratosphere. If you have a big volcano go off, puts a lot of stuff in the stratosphere, it cuts down the sunlight. And we measure this at the surface, both with LiDAR and with surface measurements. And you can see the amount of energy coming in, and then all of a sudden it goes down. This was after the El Chichon volcano. We lost about 5% of all the solar energy. And then after Pinatubo, it went down about 3.5 to 4. So there's very good basis for saying that at one time there was a huge volcanic eruption or two that could have shut down vegetation and killed dinosaurs. Very easily could happen. We could actually measure a loss of energy for about 3 or 4 years across the Earth in the early 80s. Next slide. So this is my last slide, and it's interesting when you talk to Americans, because the US and probably a lot of the countries that overeat, each person eats about 2,400 calories of food per day, roughly. You guys, Asians eat less, but Americans and Canadians eat more. But the average US citizen uses 240,000 calories a day, equivalent energy, not from food, but for cooking, cooling, heating, pumping, plying, you name it, all the energy that's used. It's like having 100 people working for you all the time. Most of this energy comes from oil, coal, and natural gas. Asia, which includes Japan, only uses about 25% as much energy per capita compared to the US. So hopefully, North America, Canada, and US will cut down their energy consumption. Possibly. Realistically, a little bit. Will we do it a lot? I don't think so. China, the people are raising their consumption. I went to China just after Mao died as a young person. I was very fortunate because I had a Chinese wife. It opened some doors, and I met many young scientists there. And I went to their homes, one that I've kept in contact for 40 years. I went to his place. He had a little apartment, 2 rooms, and a communal kitchen with 5 other families. And that's how he was living. He was a scientist. His income was less than what I waste in money in a day. I go back to see him now. He lives in about, I'd say 800. He lives in a bigger house than I do. All on one floor. It's marble. His kitchen is like a hotel kitchen. He cannot drive a car. During Mao's time, he was on a pig ranch. And he was told to marry that woman, and he married and had 1 child. He can't drive a car, but he has the beautifulest big BMW you ever saw. And I said, what is the crazy reason for having a BMW in your garage? He says, because I can. And I said, what do you do with it? He says, each weekend, I take my driver and I tell him drive 200 kilometers that way. And I look at the country and enjoy my country. Then I drive home, put the car in the garage till next weekend. I hope that all Chinese don't do that. But have you been to Beijing recently? Have you seen all the cars? In 1980s, when I first went there, the roads were wide, thousands of bicycles. Now, no bicycles. Cars everywhere, 8 lanes wide through Beijing, every direction. Housing outside of Beijing, those beautiful big houses, when you go out towards the wall, have you seen those big houses there? It's incredible how rich some of the Chinese are, but they're using, I think, as much energy as the average American now. Is that going to change soon? I don't think so, but it might. Without that, I think I'm finished. Thank you. We're open for questions.
Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. Okay, now it's open for discussion. Are there any questions and comments?
You can ask any question you want, social, financial, anything like that. So when I talk to high school students, I get some very interesting questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the very nice presentation. And the IPCC pointed out that we have to target the 2 degrees or hopefully 1.5 degrees in the next decade. However, CO2 increasing and CFC replacement also increasing. What should we do for the 2.2 degree or 1.5 target?
Yeah, the IPCC just came out with another report about 3 weeks ago or so that said we've really got to cut CO2, and if we really want to save the Earth to what it is like we've got to become to zero CO2 output. That question that you ask, I get that every time I give a talk. If it's not the first question, it's the second. I do not have a good answer.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if there is a good answer.
Yeah.
There must be, but I think a lot of people think of it, but how? Let's be realistic. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, in Japan, the population is decreasing now. Maybe our society becomes a more environmental good society. But to what globally the population increasing, still increasing.
And
we be the one
yeah, and there's a lot of places in the world, like we mentioned, India, they want to get their people up to a certain level. China, there's still a lot of poor people, but they're getting better all the time. Who would have thought that 50 years ago, the poor, mixed up China would be one of the most powerful, rich countries on earth? I never thought that. But look, and so the people are using more energy. Is the US going to get smaller cars, smaller houses, not eat fruit flowing in from South America? In winter, you can get any fruit you want, probably in Japan also. Tropical fruit, because it comes in by plane or by ship. Are we going to stop that? Maybe not.
And my final question is, do you have any quick opinion for the renewable energy usage?
Renewable energy is really taking off, and it's doing quite well. China is doing it very well. The US is just finally starting to get that. Except our current government thinks differently. They are penalizing renewable energy and subsidizing drilling and making more oil. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do. Otherwise, we'll have to just adapt to the climate. See, we assume that we want to stay at the same climate. That may not be realistic. Maybe we have to adjust, build seawalls on our low-level places, help the poor countries that are going to get affected more, use more renewable energies, lower our lifestyle a bit. If I had an answer, I would tell you, but I don't. And the people I've talked to, nobody who is realistic can give a good answer. A lot of people could say, oh, use renewables for everything, but it's hard to fly an airplane on renewables. It's hard to run a military on renewables. It's hard to move a lot of food around the world on renewables.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Does anybody here have a good idea? No, seriously. Somewhere it's going to come. We hope.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Oh. You first? Okay. So, thank you very much for a fascinating talk. I'm not the expert in this field. I'm a computational material scientist, right? So, I have a question. In the former part of your presentation, you mentioned about the role of the CO2 and CH4 that are favorable for increase in temperature of the Earth. On the other hand, in the last part of your presentation, you mentioned about the role of the pollution and the eruption of the mountain, volcano, right? Those hinders the temperature increase. So I have no questions. Does the human industrialization really increase the temperature of the Earth? Is my question clear to you?
Yes. The aerosols can affect and cool, but the aerosols are only in the air a maximum of 8 to 10 days. They have a very short lifetime.
I see.
The volcanoes, they can cool the earth, but they're only in the air 3 or 4 years. But there are proposals now studying to put aerosols up using rockets to cool the earth, or to put big reflectors in space, but that's very expensive. And what happens if you do this and you cool and hold the earth, and then the government changes or your system fails, then all of the CO2 that's up there will just come back with a vengeance, because the CO2 will be there 1,000 years. These other effects are only days, weeks, months, or years. So we've really got to work on the CO2. The methane will go away within 10 years or so maybe, but CO2 is the real problem, and it's long-term. So all these other things can come and go, but CO2 will still be there
I see.
later on.
So time scales are quite different.
Very different,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. I have two questions. I've already met you, and I work in NOAA. So first question is, when I get to US, I found American people is very, as you said, wasting energy. I shouldn't say waste, but people don't know they're wasting energy. The lifestyle and transportation, they have to rely on the car and so on, and big refrigerator they need. So to reduce the CO2 emission, they have to change the lifestyle, of course. But do you think NOAA is going to promote that kind of the change of lifestyle, or they're going to work on it? And the second question is, I think I was kicked out from the NOAA because of that, but financial situation. The current administration office, President, I don't like to say his name, he's kind of against the global warming. And do you think for scientists, you can, NOAA or those environment institute can get enough money to study? It's a really important issue, and everybody agrees except him. But what do you think about the funding situation?
The funding situation is, in our lab in NOAA, very dire. If the budget that President Trump puts in, about half to a quarter of our division will be gone, and most of our observations will be gone. I will be gone, and a lot of other people. It's right now we're just surviving because we haven't had an increase, and inflation is slowly killing us. We've lost about 20% of our staff and our measurement abilities over the last 5 or 6 years. That administration will eventually be gone. Hopefully things will change. But we are relying more now on China, Korea, Japan, data from the aircraft programs. We can't even afford to put equipment on those big aircraft like the Japan Airlines do. So it's a sad way, in a way, that, but back to what you say, we waste so much energy. In Boulder, where she has lived for some time, half the houses, and most people live in a private house, do not have insulation in the walls. They're hollow. But energy now is getting so cheap, natural gas, the price has gone down by about 50 to 70% for what it was 10 years ago. So why save? My utility bill is so small now compared to what it used to be, I don't even think about it. I put solar energy in, so I don't have electricity bill. My gas bill is less than taking my family out for a meal for a whole month. So there's no incentive. So we're using all of this energy. As you know, in the US, you can go into a grocery store and there'll be freezers that are open. The freezers are open so that you can grab your food or reach down, but not have to open a door. So you come in, and the front door is probably open in winter, so they have a heat blanket coming down. You step inside, they heat the building, and then you go over here, the cold air is coming from the refrigerator. And this whole mentality is unsustainable in the short term. It's very sustainable in the long term. In the short term, it's sustainable because energy is so cheap. I'm not a politician. And I never will be. I can't be. I wasn't born in the US, that's why.
I'm curious about the educational system in the USA. So how American people accept that situation in grocery store or yeah. So
How can they accept it? It's a very good question. The education system is very different. There's no standard across the US. There's no standard across the state. Each little city or county sets their own education. So some counties and some schools are very good and other ones are not. In Boulder, the city has a reputation in 2 or 3 schools to be very good. You can go 50 kilometers away and the schools are very, very poor. It's just the way the culture is. They don't have a strong central government that sets standards or sets rules. In Texas, there are textbooks that they have taken out anything about evolution, anything about energy use, completely is gone. It's not even taught.
how do you think about the outreach activity from parents to students or educators?
We try, but NOAA is not allowed to do anything political. And our data, we do not make any climate predictions. We just produce data. Because if we started taking that data, feeding it into computers, we would push a dot here, change something there, maybe, because scientists are human. So we make the data, and then we show everybody how we do it, and we give it away. You can look on our website, and some of our data is there in real time from our stations. And it's just completely open, and if you ever ask, how did you get this data point? We have all the standards, all of the history, and it's free and open to anybody. Of all of the scientific papers published, 30 to 50% are published outside of our division by people around the world who use the data and trust it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come to Japan again. I appreciate it.
時間
あ、いや、まだ大丈夫
まだ大丈夫です。
じゃあ続けていただいて。
どんどんもうちょっと。
ライブラリーの紹介。
ライブラリー。
ライブラリー。
押してもらいます。
That little wooden structure you see there is called a Little Free Library. And in the US, some years ago, my daughter said, I would like a little library to put in my yard so children in the neighborhood can get free books. My daughter lives in a ghetto. You know what a ghetto is in the US? Broken houses, poor people, poor schools. But she wants to make a difference. So I built her something bigger than that. And each week she puts about 50 books in it. And all the children come and line up and take free books. And soon other people in the neighborhood started putting books in that they had. So I started making these libraries out of wood that other people throw away. Till I can collect enough lumber or wood or plastic that people throw away, then I build a new library. And I have built, this is number 21. And one day, my good friend, I sent her an email and she asked me, what are you doing these days? And I said, I'm building libraries. And I sent her a picture of 5 or 6 I had ready to go. And jokingly I said, would you like one? And she said, yes. So I built one and I brought it with me as luggage. yesterday from the US. And she can put it on Mount Fuji. But if you look closely, you'll see some of the lumber has wormholes in it. And it's a little bit not square because I only use old junk lumber. And sometimes it takes me a whole month to find enough. But I have taken them to Australia, to Canada, and to many places in the US. Because I fly so much on United Airlines, they let me take 140 pounds, what is that? 70 kilos? 65 kilos of luggage I can take. So there's one piece of luggage I brought. And these libraries are becoming very popular now in different towns. And people put books in and other people take them. So we hope maybe the idea was this would be maybe at the bottom of Mount Fuji, and when people bring back their booklets, the guidebooks, they'll put them in for the next people, or you can put books wherever. If you want another one, just let me know, and if I come by Japan again, I will bring you. I'm on my way to Korea, but I stopped off to drop the library to my good friend here. Some conspiracy.
Can you hear me? Okay. I made this slide for reception, not for now, but so I can show you 2 minutes. I'll tell you what RAS is, and this
Speak in Japanese.
In addition, okay. You all heard about his scientific field. It's not for scientific Fuselage. Scientists know about role model and advocate.
You have to hold it close to your mouth.
Can you? I see. Food loss. Scientists, no doubt about it. You all heard what he talked. Okay? And then advocate. Big support for our activity from the beginning of NPO work from 2006 and 7 and 2009 at Taiwan, and he was always helpful for us. And next, traveler. He's a fantastic traveler. Visited every single continent in 91 countries. And family man. Yeah. He has 2 grandsons, a daughter, a son, and a wife. Loyal friend. Why don't ask him with impressive story? It's a little secret, but I'll show you later. Okay? This is the first slide in our NPO symposium in 2006. he had helped us in English. You had already had the clear NPO in Japanese and English. That one. And the English type, he helped us. So from then, he has been encouraging us since then. We are very grateful about that. Thank you. This is his family style. This is from his Christmas letter. I'm sorry, I got that. This past spring, this is just said in his letter, an honorary Doctor of Science degree from the University of Alberta, Canada, which was highlight of my life. Attached is a photo from after ceremony of my wife, who, as you know, she's Chinese. We have a daughter and son in their 30s. The daughter is married and with two born 3 and 5 years old. This is a little 2 years ago, so maybe 5 and 7 years. Thank you. And this is his interest includes building wooden trains for children and constructing, donating, and little free libraries. That is, he has already sent us one. This is one. Professor Ogoji. Hotel. Okay, next please. This is a little library. Special present from us to NPO this year. The last one, what a touching story. He took a trip from London to Japan on the Siberian Express train in 1971 and made 5 international friends on board, including a Japanese girl. Five of them, Dutch, Danish class artist, Swiss Red Cross insider, and Australian art group, and Swiss descent of noble family, could have great reunion in Denmark 3 years ago. Unfortunately, they missed one Japanese lady.